Okay, everybody, we're ready to get started. Today, we're going to be talking about our current market and what I'm calling multiple offer fatigue. So, you may have seen the email a couple of days ago about how we all have been in so many multiple offer situations in the last few weeks that we and our buyers are just absolutely exhausted, emotionally wrung out. So, when I sent that email out 2 days ago, I had an agent call me and say, I don't know how you were in my brain this morning, but I had literally just been having coffee with my husband and telling him how absolutely wrung out I am over making so many multiple offers and trying to continue to buoy my buyers and assure them that we're going to find them a house. So, what I want to talk about is strategies that you may be able to implement to make your buyers' offers more attractive. So, when you write up your offer, it is smart to go ahead and get a educational piece done ahead of time with your buyers so that they understand what it's going to be like. They may not understand that they're going to be up against 5, 6, 7 multiple offers. They have not bought a house in this type of market before. Listen, the agents right now are overwhelmed by this feeling. So I can't even imagine what the buyers are feeling like. So I personally have had multiple offers for months now, and my buyers have not been winning. So, one particular set of clients, we have fine tuned our offer writing over the last 4 houses that we've tried to get. And it was baby steps. No buyer right out of the gate is ready to just knock all the wheels off the cart and do no appraisal and I'll pay cash for any appraisal short. But there are some baby steps you can do that won't necessarily leave your buyer at so much risk. So the first one I want to talk about is having a really candid conversation with your buyers about repairs. So the default amount of repair money of repair remediation limit in clause 17 of our purchase agreement is only $1,000. That's the default amount. Now, when we're working with our buyers and offering $8, $10, $12,000 over asking price, that $1,000 repair remediation limit might be a nice way to just let the transaction be easy for the seller. So if the seller is looking at a bunch of offers and yours is requiring absolutely no repairs performed by the seller, and let's say also your buyer agrees to pay for all of the inspections, especially for a home where the seller is no longer here or no longer living in the home, that can be very attractive to a seller because it means that they're going to ratify this contract and essentially they're going to show up to closing. They're not going to have to be at the house and meet with home inspectors, radon inspectors, termite inspectors, well, septic, all of that. They're also not going to have to worry about doing repairs. They're not going to have to try to get a contractor to have time to meet them out there. That's equally difficult right now. Contractors are just tied up and don't have time to come out and do these little estimates. And the word's getting out with the contractors that we're having them out to do these estimates. And then we're just doing some sort of financial negotiation in lieu of repairs. So the contractors aren't even necessarily getting that work that they are estimating for us. So I'm starting to see that the contractors just don't have time to come out and do those estimates for 5 or 6 little items that the buyer is hoping the seller will perform, because the end result is not work for the contractor. So if you can write your offer with no seller inspections and no seller paid repairs, really that negotiating point is just $1,000. Your buyer's just missing out on the opportunity to get $1,000, up to $1,000 worth of repairs done. So that's pretty small potatoes when you're talking about, offering $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 over asking price. It just makes the whole process more turnkey for the seller. The seller isn't having to really manage anything. So for my buyers, that's what we've been doing. And what I've been doing instead is writing in a threshold at which my buyer can terminate the contract. So, and it's going to be fairly high. I'm going to say to the buyers, listen, they're not going to give you a walk away, get out of jail free card pass here for $1,000 worth of material adverse facts. We're going to have to set that at like $4,000, $5,000. That's going to protect you, buyer, from any real catastrophic repair discoveries. But it is going to mean that you, the buyer, has some skin in the game, that you really want this house. You're going to move forward to closing unless there's some sort of catastrophic discovery. So I'm writing in language that says something to the effect of seller and purchaser agree that the seller will be required to complete 0 repairs. However, if material adverse facts discovered as a result of any and all inspections results in repairs in excess of $4,000 or $5,000, purchaser reserves the right to terminate the contract, be released, and receive a full refund of earnest money deposit. That means the seller doesn't have to pay for any repairs. However, if those discoveries are over $5,000, the buyer can terminate. And what I've found is, I did one of those last week. We had all the inspections done and we found a catastrophic repair that the seller didn't know about. So in that case, we have to get an estimate. And we have to get an estimate to prove that in this case, our walkaway point was $6,000. We had to get an estimate to prove that there was in excess of $6,000 of repairs required because of this discovery. And then our buyer has a termination right. Now, currently, I don't have anything else to sell them. So we're just trying to figure out if we're going to move forward anyway, even though this is about a $12,000 sewer repair. We've asked the seller to contribute. We're waiting to hear. Yeah, it's not good. The way I thought the day was going to go, and I thought, I had this all figured out. I had my buyers attend the home inspection, radon inspection, termite inspection, and sewer camera line inspection. And they were there for all of those inspections because the way I had it planned was they would attend these inspections and come out of that inspection either feeling comfortable or uncomfortable moving forward with the contract, right? Had we not discovered this sewer defect where the terracotta tile pipe has just collapsed on itself, had we not discovered that, I don't know that we would have gotten estimates for the home inspection repairs because it fell obviously so far below $6,000 that they would have essentially a comfort level with moving forward, that what was discovered they could fix over their term of home ownership. But then, surprise, we had a massive sewer discovery. And I feel absolutely horrible for the sellers because apparently they had a camera line inspection 3 years ago when they purchased the property. So whatever problem probably was there, but had not escalated the way it has now. So fortunately, their attitude is, well, I guess we have to do something about it. So we're, the way the contract is written, it doesn't say they will renegotiate, but I verbally have conveyed to the listing agent, and the listing agent understands we don't want to terminate. However, we have a termination right, and we don't particularly want to spend $12,000 on a sewer line replacement the moment we move into the house. So renegotiations have begun, and we will see where we land. Again, I don't have anything else to sell them. We've been watching the hot sheet and there's nothing else in the area they want to live in coming on the market. So that may be a premium these buyers elect to pay. And it brings up, an interesting side topic that, is it smarter for my folks to go ahead and move forward with this purchase because they are locked in at 2.5% interest rate and pay that sewer replacement cost out of pocket? Or is it smarter for them to terminate this, go back into the feeding frenzy of buyers trying to find a house. And now the interest rate's probably going to be 3.125 because interest rates are creeping up. So it may be, and this sounds nuts to me, it may be a better financial decision for them to go ahead and eat this $12,000 repair rather than have to take a 30-year mortgage at 3.125% instead of 2.5. And those are all conversations we need to be having with the lender and our buyers, because and this is a conversation I've been having with a lender friend of mine, is it better to lock in a rate now for like a house that maybe isn't exactly what you want and make it what you want, rather than waiting, trying to compete with all the other buyers, and now the interest rates are just slowly inching their way up, you know? Anybody have any questions about that before I move on to some other strategies? Anybody? Okay. Okay, so another strategy might be to call the listing agent ahead of time. And we've been doing this for weeks now. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've been calling the listing agent and saying, hey, chummy buddy, I am going to bring you an offer. Go ahead and tell me how many other offers you have coming and I'll cry. But my buyers want to be as flexible as possible for your sellers. What are some pinch points for your seller that we might be able to ease for you? So what would be their most desirable closing date? What would be something we could do to make the process a little easier for your seller? And I go ahead and say, I am already willing to go ahead and put all of the inspections in the buyer's column and make them responsible for all of that. That's just standard practice for me. I'm happy to do that. But like, what closing date might they like? Would your seller be more comfortable with a larger earnest money deposit? And that is a strategy I've been using for the last few weeks. My buyers have been putting down $3,000 and $4,000, and Sherry, don't laugh because I know you're at the lake and people put down $25,000 and $50,000, but we're just talking about little Roanoke people over here right now. So my buyers have been putting down $3,000 and $4,000 as their earnest money deposits. Once I explained to them that the only way they can lose that money is if they just breach the contract. If they just all of a sudden go, nope, sorry, we're not moving forward. And obviously they're not going to do that. So when they realize that that money is just essentially closing cost money sitting and waiting for them, you know, it's going to get applied to their purchase at the closing table, then they've been willing to bump up their earnest money deposit. And all that really does is mean that if the listing agent has 7 contracts lined up and they're trying to decide, it just gives another strength point to my offer that we are very earnest with our earnest money deposit. So we earnestly would like, and I write that in the email when I'm presenting the offer. And I say, you know, I want to also point out that we've put a $4,000 earnest money deposit down because my buyers earnestly want to show your seller how interested they are in the property and how much they'd like to move forward with purchasing this home. So please, in your email where you're forwarding your offer, put a few little bullet points in a paragraph there for the listing agent. What are sort of the shining star strengths in your offer? A larger earnest money deposit, no repairs paid for by the seller. And I'll give you a tip. What I'm doing, and this, I mean, I don't know that this is the right way to do it contractually, but it's what I'm doing. In clause 17, where we have the repair remediation limit, I'm putting $1 in there. And that may sound kind of kooky, but the reason why I'm doing it is I want that paragraph to still be in full effect. So let's say my folks, and this is just me kind of hedging my bets because I work for the buyer. I know I have that $6,000 or $4,000 walk away point for my buyer, but clause 17 also says that if repairs are in excess of $1, you know, I can ask the seller for up to $1 of repairs. And if they refuse or pay it, if If they issue me the $1 credit, then I have a termination right as the buyer. So I will argue that the language I wrote in about our walkaway point supersedes any standard language in the contract. So I think another broker could have a pretty solid argument against that philosophy. But I don't want to get rid of clause 17 altogether. That makes me a little nervous, you know? So I've just been putting $1 in clause 17 and letting it just stand. And we're using our additional terms language that we put in about if material adverse facts discovered during the inspections are in excess of X dollars. That language is already loaded for you in zip forms. So if you're in zip forms and you go to additional terms and click into the additional terms section of the purchase agreement, a little scroll of paper will hover above that area. You can click on that and then click on the pencil and go to the broker clauses. And it's there in the broker clauses. You can just insert it into your purchase agreement straight from there. You don't have to try to create that language yourself. Okay, so strong earnest money deposits, no seller paid inspections, no repairs paid for by the seller. Does anybody have anything else they've been doing other than customizing the closing date and customizing the terms to the seller? Who has any other sort of hot tips for making your offer stand out above anybody else's? Don't be shy. I know y'all been drowning in multiple offer situations the last few months. Yes, Kara. I know you're going to share something with us. No.
I can, but I found out that I think what I did was probably we're not supposed to do it anymore. So we wrote a small letter about our client's situation.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, I don't know if that's a
Listen,
violation.
I was doing them as recently as 3 months ago. So,
Okay.
you know, it's one of those things that it's not the best idea for fair housing reasons. But there is no arguing that those letters work with humanizing our clients, right?
Mhm.
They do. I think that's the flip side problem is they humanize them to a point where people can discriminate, you know? Obviously, that has never been the intention of the buyer's agents who write what they call buyer love letters. But I do understand that the unintended consequences is we may inadvertently be allowing some discrimination that was the unintended consequence. We weren't trying to expose our buyers to that, but it's happened. So it's one of those business practices that it's turning out may be harmful in some instances. But again, there's no arguing that that letter has worked 100 times for me. I have had to, as the broker, I've had to just say, okay, well, I just need to stop doing it because I'm telling the agents it is exposing our buyers to discrimination potentially. So I'm going to have to, you know, be that parent who has to walk the walk, you know, so I got to stop doing it. But I hear you, Kara, they do work. I mean, I have literally had listing agents tell me over the years, like, oh, they just fell in love with your client's puppy and, you know, their cute little kid. Well, there's familial status right there. So, yeah. And that's a protected class. So it's a tough one. I know. And I have, my best advice is to not write buyer love letters, you know, but they do work, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody have anything else to share?
The only thing that I have is that I've had multiple offers and that they'll go over the list price substantially, but they know they have an out with a POA or HOA.
Yes.
And it always, and that's what it comes right to it. You know, they want to be the first one of that first hour that's on, and we'll offer you 15,000 more and get everybody else out. That way, if they get out, you have to put it back on the market. It's not good. Yeah,
I agree. And POA is one of those things where it used to, by law, be 3 days for the right of rescission period. That was honestly too short of a period of time because it was calendar days and it could not by law, it could not be extended. Even if the buyer and the seller agreed to extend those 3 days, it was not allowed by the statute. So I'll agree that 3 days was too short, but now it is, you could make it, you know, much longer, and you're just extending that period of time that your seller has the property off the market. And then the buyer terminates and you're going back on market due to the POA protections for the buyer. And now you're potentially stigmatized because you have 10 days on the market, you know, but in today's world, 10 days on the market is like everybody giving it the side eye and wanting to know why it's been on the market 10 days.
Or why it came back on the market.
Yeah, that's right.
What happened? Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
Because sometimes it takes longer than that because it takes a while for the HOA to get it to you, you know.
Or you're representing a buyer and the seller is a limited service listing, meaning the listing agent just put it on the MLS
Yes.
and that's all they did.
Yes.
And then, and this is totally hypothetical, this did not happen to me last month. And then you have the POA packet, but you discover the day before closing that it's just the one they got 9 years ago. It's not actually the new one. And
Yeah.
the seller says, I mean, why am I going to pay $100? I already had it. So
Yeah.
that happens too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you guys ready to move on to sales price escalation clause and just kind of going over that a little bit and how to use that? They can be a little scary. I think we're gonna hit a point where even the listing agents are gonna get a little tired of seeing them. But listen, that's the market we're in right now. Until we have more inventory, we're going to be seeing sales price escalation clauses because there's just no other way to compete. You know, I as the buyer's agent don't want to come in and automatically be 15 grand over the listing price. You know, I want to obviously get it for the least amount of money we can get it for. But I also am aware that there are other competing offers. So the sales price escalation clause or addendum is what I'm going to use. So if you have your copy of this, I'm going to just kind of go over it and let you know what the most common choices for me are. And that it may differ depending on your client. It's important to go over this with your client and make sure they're comfortable with what's happening. I do familiarize them with it by saying, listen, have you ever bought anything on eBay? Because that's essentially what we're going to be doing. We're going to be making an offer, but then we're also going to be putting in our maximum escalated price we're willing to go to. So if you look at this sales price escalation addendum that I attached to your agenda, and by the way, that document is in our shared Google Drive. So if you go to the Wainwright shared Google Drive, and if you need a link, let me know. We have it in a resources folder there so that you can pull it from there and pull it into zip forms as an additional document and use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out that top section just with the legal description of the property and the seller and the buyer names. And then that top paragraph, that first real meaty paragraph there is just saying that we're going to increase our offer by X dollars. I do not recommend anything less than $1,000. Now, if you're offering on an $80,000 house, maybe you want to do something a little different. But quite frankly, I think anything less than $1,000, and this is just my opinion, if you're putting $250 or $400 there, I do understand that that's a lot of money to a lot of buyers, but I think it can look a little cheap to the seller. Because if the seller's got two offers and they're the same and one's going to just pay $400 more, sometimes that can rub the seller the wrong way, that it seems like somebody's just trying to snake it out from underneath the other one by paying just a teensy bit more. And sometimes it can backfire and the seller will say, no, I don't like that strategy. That's leaving a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm going to award it to the other offer, even though the other offer is for less money. Okay. So just make that chunk of money worth it to the seller. Otherwise, it can turn off the seller.
Where is this document? I'm trying to look it up in the Wainwright.
Sure. So it should be in the, well, if you want to go to the email where I sent you the link for this morning,
Okay.
it's part of that agenda, Anastasia. So it
Thank you.
should be an attachment on that email. That'll probably be the easiest way to find it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely. And I hate it, but I've been using this thing for months now. I pull it out every time the market gets tight and there are no houses on the market, and all of a sudden we're back to multiple offers. So once I put in that we're going to automatically increase by $750, $1,000, and then I'm going to put in my maximum sales price. So if I've made an offer at $225,000 on the purchase agreement, then I'm going to put in $1,000 increase, not to go above, not to exceed a maximum sale price of $235. Okay. So what that means is my client is willing to go up $10,000 to compete with other offers that are in place already. And I'll tell you how I do this. So if the house goes on the market Friday evening, we go see it Saturday morning, we write up the offer and I submit the offer, but not the sales price escalation addendum. Okay. I go ahead and craft it with my buyers and we have our conversation about how much are we willing to pay for this house. So I go ahead and craft the sales price escalation addendum, but I don't include it yet. So I send over the offer, because what if a miracle happens and they don't get any more offers, right? So then if they say something like, well, we're having an open house on Sunday from 2 to 4, and we're going to review all offers at 5 on Sunday, then I'm going to call that agent around 4:30 on Sunday and say, hey, did you get any more offers? How many offers are we dealing with this evening? And if he says, you know what, the weirdest thing happened, we didn't get any more offers, I'm not sending this sales price escalation. Because if I send that, then the seller knows we're willing to go and can financially go up $10,000. And you know what happens? We get a counter offer from them. You know, there's nothing to trigger this escalation addendum because there isn't a competing offer. But all of a sudden we get a counter offer for $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 more than we offered. So I don't want the seller to even know this exists unless I get confirmation that we are in a multiple offer situation. Okay. Now that may bite me in the rear end, because if at 4:30 there are no other offers and that agent goes and meets with their seller at 5 p.m. and boom, 2 offers hit his email, I have now just shot myself in the foot because I should have sent the sales price escalation addendum. So it's just about having good communication with the listing agent. If I'm getting poor communication from the listing agent, I may go ahead and send this and hedge my bets and hope that there are going to be competing offers to trigger this escalation clause. So it's not a perfect science by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm doing is I'm making our strongest offer and then keeping that sales price escalation addendum in the wings in case we enter a multiple offer situation. Because it's this market is going to level off. And when it does level off, we're going to have sellers who are sitting on overpriced homes because they got in on this, tidal wave of overextended market values. And then they're going to be left with these overpriced listings. But we're also going to have buyers who are still in the habit of overpaying, who are maybe going to overpay in these. They're used to 4 other offers and now there's only 2 offers because it's just a bell curve. All of a sudden I was competing against 1 other offer, then 4 other offers, and then situations where there were 5 and 6 multiple offers. And it's just going to taper back off the same way it climbed up, in my opinion, if I believe how trends happen in real estate. So once I've put in on this sales price escalation addendum how much we're willing to go up and our maximum sales price, then I have to get into the nitty gritty of what does that look like when the appraisal comes in. Because a lot of the contracts I'm seeing just have some language in the additional terms section where it's indicating that, just some very simple escalation language. The problem comes later when the appraisal comes in above the listing price, but not at or above the escalated price. Well, the problem with just that little bit of language in the additional terms section is we've not dealt with what happens then. What is going to happen? And I'll tell you, most of my broker to broker phone calls are because of weak language written into contracts. You do we want to do this, but you never write in the end of that thought, which is, except if this, that, or this happens, then these acts will happen. So please call me if you're crafting language on your own, because just a second set of eyes on it, and I've crafted a ton of clauses in my day, and I'm happy to give you my ideas on that. I've also seen a lot of stuff that's written and goes wrong. So, learn from others. So in number 1 on the sales price escalation addendum, it's stating that in the event of an increase in the sales price under this addendum, will the loan amount be adjusted accordingly, or will it be added to the down payment? So in the case of my buyers from last week, we indicated that there's going to be an increase to the down payment. So they had a little bit of cash stores saved up, and they didn't want to take a bigger mortgage, okay? Because they already knew what their monthly mortgage payment was going to be. They didn't want to mess with that. So if their offer price got escalated by $5,000, they were just going to bring $5,000 extra in cash for their down payment, okay? That would leave the mortgage the way they had structured it. So that would be, you'd have a choice there. And that's a conversation with your buyer. They may say, Ashley, we only have our down payment and our closing cost money. Okay, well then we're going to adjust the loan accordingly. Number 2 says if another competing offer contains a similar escalation price, are we allowing them to escalate this only one $1,000 amount? Or can we do multiples as long as they don't exceed our maximum sales price? And so multiple escalations is what I almost always choose. The only time you might choose only one escalation being authorized is if you've got a buyer who is just so emotionally wrung out by this entire process that they're starting to get kind of frustrated with the whole thing, and they're starting to feel taken advantage of. So if that's the case, maybe you want to reassess even using a sales price escalation addendum and talk to them about just making their strongest offer and letting the chips fall where they may. 3, should purchaser's contract be accepted at an escalated price? Is the purchaser going to reserve the right to see a copy of the offer that had escalated their price, or is it automatically going to be provided? I always check the second option, which is the seller is going to automatically provide it to the purchaser within 24 hours. I want to see that they had a real reason to escalate my price. Now, they don't have to. They could just say, you know what, we're not even dealing with these sales price escalation clauses. If your buyer will go to 232, we're going to take your offer. And I explain that to my buyers before we submit our offer, because for some reason they think that the seller's only option is escalate the prices and take the highest offer. No, the seller can take whatever offer they want to take. It's the highest and best offer. Maybe my buyer's doing a USDA loan and somebody else's is doing a conventional loan. My offer's for more money, but they don't want to fiddle around. The seller doesn't want to fiddle around with the USDA loan. So they may opt to take a lower price for a conventional loan. It is up to the seller which offer they want to take. So in this case, if they're going to use my sales price escalation clause, I want to see proof that there was another offer that triggered the escalation of our sales price. Okay. 4, if the appraised value is at or above the list price, but doesn't cover the escalated price, then is the purchaser going to cover it in cash? Or are we going to give the seller the right to void the contract unless we renegotiate? So I'm going to have already had this conversation with my buyer. Okay, buyer, we understand that we're offering now more than the list price. So obviously we are buying above market value. Because we're buying above market value, there is a chance the appraisal will come in low. And because there's a chance the appraisal will come in low, we either need to have cash to bring to the table and make up that difference, or we understand that this may fall apart at the appraisal. And last spring, I sold a brick ranch in Roanoke City for some sort of record price. It just was lightning in a bottle. I'll never get it again. It just happened to be the exact right weekend during the beginning of the pandemic when there was like a final push for everybody to buy a house before we kind of went on real lockdown for a few months. So she got like $25,000 over her asking price. And I priced it. It was fairly priced, but my seller got about $25,000 more. Now it escalated. There were like 6 multiple offers, 6 or 9. There were a ton. And my advice to her was to go ahead and just take the highest price. That appraisal, there was a really strong chance that appraisal was going to come in low, but I'd rather shoot the moon and have the appraisal come in low than go 1 notch below or 1 notch below and take those lower offers and potentially still have the appraisal come in low. So I had already advised my seller, whatever that appraisal comes in at, if it's above list price, but below our escalated price, you're just going to take it because that's still more than we thought we were going to get. And I don't know how in the world, but it appraised and she was a very, very happy camper.
And that became the new norm in that neighborhood because then the other houses in that area started going for more.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. We became the new comp. So, and it's funny because I pointed it out to Jennifer some months back, or a couple months after that. Another brick ranch had gone on the market for even more than ours sold for. And I was like, holy moly. I've had very many holy moly moments in the last year. It's been a wild ride, but okay. So number 5, if the appraisal is less than the list price, well, then we got major problems, right? What's going to happen? Is the purchaser going to cover it in cash? Or is the purchaser going to pay a maximum of blank dollars above the appraised value, but not to exceed the escalated price? So this little piece right here is where you're saying how much cash reserves your buyer has to cover an appraisal short. So in the case of my buyers from last weekend, I put in $5,000 there. My buyers had $5,000 in cash above and beyond their closing costs and down payment. They essentially had $5,000 in cash that they could afford to pay cash for above market value. So if the appraisal came in $5,000 lower than we needed, my folks could keep moving forward and were acknowledging that they were willing to pay $5,000 in cash for that appraisal short. So in the case of last year, when I had 9 offers and almost all of them, probably about 4 or 5 of them were over list price. In that case, maybe the offer willing to pay $5,000 in cash towards an appraisal short might have been the most attractive offer. It might have been. All I'm trying to do is set my offer apart from everyone else's. So for my clients last year, it meant some protections in place for the seller, that if the appraisal came in $5,000 lower than we needed it to be, that's cool, seller. We'll still move forward. We'll just pay that difference in cash. Okay. So it provides a $5,000 sort of buffer for the appraisal to come in low. Or you can check the terms of the financing exhibit in the contract shall apply. Just like anytime the appraisal comes in low, then the seller and the buyer have an opportunity to kind of talk about what are we going to do about that? And both parties have a termination right. Now, that last paragraph on the sales price escalation addendum, you do not fill out. That is filled out once the final purchase price is verbally determined and accepted by both parties, and you've signed off everything. This is the last piece, and you put in there, usually the seller, the listing agent does this. They're going to put in what that final escalated sales price was. So in the case of this example offer I'm doing, where our maximum sales price is $235, we'll go up $1,000 above every other offer, up to $235. If we won, then that final price, maybe we got escalated to $234. $234 is going to go in that slot as the new purchase price. Okay. Does that make sense, everybody? I'm sorry, this is our market. I wish it was not.
I'm also going to chime in for just a minute.
Please.
Because being in the office, we see all the contracts that come through, and we are seeing a lot of folks waiving the appraisal contingency.
Mhm.
So that's also how in multiple offer situations, people are beating you out on your offers because they're waiving that contingency for the appraisal. So we are seeing that too.
And as a listing agent, you should be asking questions about that. Because if the buyer is waiving the appraisal contingency, they better have cash to pay that difference. It's all well and good for a buyer's agent to be like, oh, and we don't care about the appraisal, no problem. Well, what happens when it comes in $10,000 lower? And then you've got a buyer's agent going, oh, well, they don't have $10,000 cash. Your seller just needs to lower the price. No. Relieving the seller of that appraisal contingency, the whole point of it was that your buyer would pay cash difference. So if, as a listing agent, if you're reviewing offers and they have relieved, the appraisal contingency from that offer, you need to be asking, hey, I noticed you guys are waiving the appraisal contingency. Does your buyer have a limit there? Do they just have infinite cash that they're willing to pay if the appraisal comes in low? And just ask those questions, because you don't want to find out 3 weeks later when the appraisal comes in $10,000 lower than their escalated winning price. And the buyer's agent goes, oh, I didn't know that's what that meant, because this is all new. Everybody, unless you've been in this 20 years, you haven't been in this market before. You have not been in a market where you're competing against 6 and 7 other agents, right? That is kind of why my sales price escalation addendum kind of looks like it was made in the 80s, because I think it really was made in the 80s. It's terribly old, but it still does the job. So, yes, Anastasia, do you have a question, please?
Number 5,
Yes.
the terms of the financing exhibit in contract shall apply.
Yes.
Does that mean I'm not paying the difference in cash and I'm not paying a maximum of anything? I'm only paying what I'm offering?
No, it means that in clause 13, where it talks in the purchase agreement, where it talks about the appraisal, it addresses if the appraisal comes in low, essentially. And what it means is the seller and the buyer can renegotiate, but both have a termination right. The seller does not have to sell it for less. And I'm going to get on my little soapbox here for a minute, because buyers get so mad when sellers won't lower the price to the appraised value, and they get all up on their moral soapbox and they're like, well, if your house isn't worth it, you should be selling it for less. Well, what I always say is, well, you know what? No seller, when the appraisal comes in higher than the list price, is saying, buyer, give me $5,000 more. I apparently undersold to you. So it cuts both ways, the seller does not have to sell their house for less than what they agreed to. That's the point of the appraisal and the point of both parties having a termination right. Now, maybe my advice to my seller as the listing agent is, it came in $1,500 low or $2,000 low. Do you just want to sell it to them anyway? Do you want to ask them if they'll split that difference? And if the buyers will pay $600 towards that low appraisal in cash, and you'll lower the price $600. There can be some renegotiating, but if that's not successful, either party can terminate, because we can't make the seller sell it for less, but we can't make the buyer pay cash for the difference, so it's a protection for both. Did that answer your question, Anastasia?
Well, I'm just being honest. I looked up paragraph 13.
Yep.
And where is this lingo that we're referencing?
Well, let me look. Oh, apparently, hold on. Let me see if I can get there while I'm.
I just pulled up a random contract just so I can read it.
Okay.
Because I'm wondering if you're going to potentially be check marking more than one item in that number 5.
Let me see.
Okay.